story set on a ship inhabited by some very strange people.
It's a film that works on various levels. On the one level it's a kind of horror film, on another it's a psychological thriller, and on the other there's a social conscience.
Me había entusiasmado bastante con el guión porque me parecía, además, viniendo del Paul, una historia muy especial y muy arriesgada.
Had a lot of very strange things happening.
No solamente es un thriller así normal y corriente, sino tiene una historia muy inteligente, incluso una historia real debajo de todo ese suspense.
It was also a kind of psychological story, a story of a psychological game going on between the two main characters.
Es una coproducción, una producción muy europea. Todos los actores son de cada país, de alemanes, ingleses, escoceses, españoles, de Finlandia, de Bélgica.
Viendo cómo ruedan, creo que han aprovechado muy bien las fuerzas telúricas que hay dentro del barco, ¿no? Dentro del propio rodaje, porque es todo es pesado, es duro, es metálico.
Cargo es una película que tiene una larga historia, que se remonta casi hace 10 años, cuando conocí a Paul Laverty, el guionista, que se encontraba en Los Ángeles investigando y estudiando la vida en el puerto de Los Ángeles para documentarse de cara a la escritura de este guión.
Yo estaba trabajando en Estados Unidos durante esta época y en Los Ángeles, estudiando, investigando Pan y Rosas, que dirigió Ken Loach. Entonces yo de vez en cuando escapé al puerto de San Pedro, 30 kilómetros de Los Ángeles, y yo me fui a visitar los barcos, a hablar con la tripulación, gente que han trabajado en el mar. Entonces poco a poco ocurrió la idea de Capitán Brooks. Es totalmente distinto a las películas que he hecho con Ken Loach. Yo quise intentar otra manera, más gótico, más oscuro.
Cuando leí el guión me encantó y le sugerí la posibilidad de poder producir la película en coproducción con una persona que tanto él como yo conocíamos, que es una productora escocesa que se llama Andrea Calderwood, con quien estamos produciendo la película.
We talked again about Gull, as it was called then, and Juan and I both felt it was a really strong story, and we also really wanted the chance to work with Paul. And Paul had also been very keen to work with Clive Gordon, who's a fantastic documentary maker whose work we'd all admired. And I sat down with Clive and talked to him about how he wanted to go about making the film, and I just thought his take on it was exactly what the film needed. So it was over 10 years from the first time we read the script to when we finally got the film made. So it was a great moment. We were all standing on board the ship in Barcelona in the snow nearly 11 years later, thinking we'd finally done it. But it was a great process because we were working with friends and it was a genuinely international collaboration.
I got a strange telephone call from a Scottish scriptwriter. At that stage I could hardly understand what he was saying actually, Mr. Laverty, who had seen a couple of my documentaries and had a proposal that we meet up to talk about a script that he's written, a very strange script. It was clear very quickly on reading the script that the story had huge potential. The weirdness was what struck you first of this story. Strange people, the imagery of this ship floating around on the ocean with a cargo of tropical birds. Basically cut away from the weirdness, the areas where it went over into the supernatural, and at the same time intensify the way the story, which has got a lot of psychological and political implications, but to intensify the way it works as a straightforward thriller.
Ahí abajo hay alguien. ¿Quién es Rebeca?
Cerraste la puerta, echaste el pestillo y te dormiste. No me preguntes más.
As far as the crew were concerned, they don't have to say a lot, and they just have to look as if they are a real crew of hard-bitten misfits, effectively, is what they are, whom the captain has picked up on his travels around the world. So it needed to be an international crew of people. So much in what they do is something that you have to read in their expression, in their faces, in the way they are and behave. So that was the critical factor with all of those guys.
Bueno.
In terms of the main parts, I'd admired Peter Mullan for a long time. I think he's a fantastic actor. He was somebody that had been suggested also by Paul Laverty, who'd worked with him before on My Name is Joe.
I read the script not knowing who had actually written it, and I was very, very, very pleased to find out that it was Paul Laverty, who I'd worked with in My Name is Joe.
El corazón de la película es la alma de Captain Brooks. En su profundidad es un hombre, bueno, envenenado, con odio, con muchas contradicciones en su vida, pero también es un hombre que entiende cómo funciona el mundo. En su profundidad, Peter es un hombre político, entiende cómo funciona el mundo, el sistema financiero, la relación entre el tercer mundo y el primer mundo. Entonces, para Peter entrar en este mundo contradictorio de Brooks era muy fácil para él, creo.
I understood who Brooks was. I knew his soul and his ambitions and his pain and the way he looked at the world.
He put on an absolutely steely expression. He didn't move. It didn't move a millimeter, and he needed that quality. He needed to have that quality. Brooks has that quality.
Puedes trabajar con Bautista. No lo necesito. En la cocina. Preferiría que no. En la cocina.
Chris was a rather difficult part to cast because we were looking for somebody who could potentially, be a 22-year-old, and there are not a lot of people around who are that young looking, who've actually had the kind of experience that could lead you to believe that they could do this. And then the name of Daniel Brühl came up, which was a very interesting idea.
Creo que la gente que va a ver esta película la verá con los ojos de Chris. Él hace todo ese viaje en este barco y empieza como un chico normal, inocente, y durante el tiempo que está en el barco intenta entender lo que es el misterio de esa tripulación súper extraña, y sabe que hay un peligro muy grande, y al final, pues su reto es de sobrevivir.
¿Dormiste bien anoche, Chris? Pareces cansado.
Muy bien, gracias.
¿Soñaste mucho?
Nunca sueño.
Tienes la conciencia tranquila.
Luis Tosar was another unusual choice. He was a Spanish actor. I'd seen some of his films.
Clive y yo tuvimos una entrevista previa en la que nos conocimos y vimos la posibilidad de hacer unas pruebas y tal para ver si realmente aquello podía funcionar entre los dos.
He seemed right for the part. He looked right.
Parece que nos caímos bien y parece que el trabajo se podía encauzar hacia una dirección.
The problem was that he didn't speak any English.
Y entonces Clive, pues un buen día, muy poco tiempo después, llamó y dijo que sí, que se animaba a hacerlo, ¿no?
When we heard what he came up with after 2 days with a voice coach, we thought, okay, let's take a risk.
¿Por qué te llaman el Bautista?
Porque antes bautizaba.
¿Ya no bautizas?
Ahora ya no creo en nada. Solo cocino. Eso es todo. Bautista es un tío raro. Lo que pasa es que si hay alguien dentro de la tripulación que yo creo que tiene la esperanza de que se puedan salvar en algún momento y de que se puedan mínimamente reconducir sus vidas, pues yo creo que sería Bautista. Tuve que preparar un poco de cocina, incluso estuve yendo al gimnasio intentando ponerme más ancho hasta que vi aquí, hasta que vi a Kumi allá, y entonces dije, no, es inútil para hacer cachas en esta película, ¿no? Lo que sí que quería era aparecer con una imagen un poco más ruda de lo que yo aparezco habitualmente, ¿no? Por eso los pelos, la cosa así más desarreglada.
¿Qué estás haciendo aquí?
Ten cuidado. Tardaremos 7 días en llegar. Tú a lo tuyo. Y sin hablar. Luego vete del barco.
Clive, the director, was looking for someone with a documentary background similar to his, but with experience in feature films.
I met Sean Bobbitt and got on with him very well, and I'd seen a film that he'd done a few years back called Wonderland, in which he shot with a very wide screen, 235:1, but handheld, and that was quite an unusual thing to do. It's slightly more common nowadays, but it was a very unusual thing to do, and not a lot of people can do it.
Through discussion with Clive and looking at the characters and the journey that they undergo throughout the length of the film, we developed a visual concept which we hoped would help and augment the telling of the story about their journey. So we start off in a very bright, a very hot, colored, saturated Africa, and as we progress through the journey, moving towards Europe to the north, it becomes a colder, a slightly more desaturated and more ominous and darker feel as the journey unfolds. Clive's documentary background, I think, has hopefully brought an element of realism to the lighting, to the situations and to the characters themselves. Also, it's using the handheld camera is specifically a documentary technique, and one which I think works very well within the context of this film.
The camera moving to follow what the actors wanted to do, rather than telling everybody, oh, stand there and then move here and move there.
Los actores somos muy afortunados. Se está trabajando mucho a nuestro favor, ¿no? La cámara deambula por ahí buscándonos siempre, ¿no? Y nosotros no tenemos que estar buscándola a ella.
No sé cómo va a aparecer en la pantalla, pero el barco de verdad está podrido, es viejo, a punto de ahogarse. Me encanta este barco. Yo imaginaba un poquito más grande, pero la verdad es encontrar un barco tan jodido es súper difícil.
Cuando estuvimos en Barcelona viendo el Ira, que es el nombre original del barco en el que estamos hoy, vinimos a verlo como una referencia de un barco que llevaba varios años abandonado en el puerto de Barcelona y que de cara al diseño de los decorados y al diseño del tipo de barco que andábamos buscando era el ideal, con el problema de que este era un barco que estaba abandonado, no tenía seguros, no tenía certificaciones para poder navegar y por tanto no era un barco que pudiéramos utilizar. Cuando Clive vio el barco y cuando Paul vio el barco, nos preguntaron, tanto a Andrea como a mí, si realmente existía alguna posibilidad de poder utilizar este barco navegando.
So after long negotiation, we ended up having that ship to film on, and the ship becomes like a character in the film. I think it did become very claustrophobic for the cast and the crew. I wasn't there all the time, but I think for them, after a while, they did get a bit cabin fever on it. But I think it was a very good thing to do because it just gave a really authentic atmosphere to the film. And we had very good advice from Vicente, who told us how to, you know, when it was safe to go out in the ship and when we could use it. So I think for the authenticity of the film, it was a very good thing to have the ship. We also did build a hold in a warehouse outside Barcelona for the more complicated scenes. Just, you know, apart from the rats and the dirt in the hold, we just felt logistically we couldn't film in the hold of the ship. But it was really good to have the ship for the, you know, for the heart of the rest of the film.
The ship was in very, very bad condition. I mean, it was, you know, virtually unsaleable. We had patched it up and we'd got all the necessary certifications so it was safe. But at the same time, it was very cramped. Some of the shooting was done there's a scene in the shower where and we'd always decided we want to use the real space. We had an option of going to a studio for the whole ship, and we decided that you know you can never really recreate the effect of the real, and even if it means that walls are in the wrong place, it's much better to live with that and have that. And you know, even if you can't put the camera where you'd like to put it, you feel you're in a real place.
Rodar en un barco es complicado de por sí, ¿no? Es una cosa muy constreñida, somos mucha gente, un rodaje se compone de muchas personas, entonces lógicamente cuanto menos espacio, pues más tensión tiene que haber. Pero yo creo que esto es algo intencionado y algo que me parece una solución muy inteligente, ¿no? Aprovechar la propia tensión que puede haber en un rodaje en el que se mueve tanta gente y tantas cosas, para que lo que luego es la historia, que realmente es así, es de perros que están encerrados en un sitio, que tienen muy poco espacio para moverse, que empiezan a pasar cosas, que empieza a haber cada vez más tensión, Y la tensión provoca, bueno, cada vez más desencuentros entre las relaciones que hay montadas, ¿no?
Era difícil, sobre todo para el cameraman, de meter toda esa tripulación, porque bueno, yo soy delgado con los otros tíos que son unos cachas, unas mulas, para meterlos ahí en esos espacios tan pequeños realmente era un problema.
The story is also a story which has an emotional dimension, and because the whole world that we're creating on the ship is so unusual, so weird, the music should reflect that and should intensify that as well. So that was the plate that we handed, the empty plate that we handed to Stephen Warbeck, who is a fantastically talented composer. And some of it, it has to have that scale, especially as you're working towards the more emotional areas later. So we had a full orchestra of 53 people, complemented by this motley collection of, you can't even call them instruments, that Stephen likes to use. We have a lot of the percussion is played on, and they were all laid out on the studio floor. It looked like a torture chamber. Old car doors, bits of rusting metal, a filing cabinet which gets bashed to bits by one of Stephen's musicians. And the sounds that were created in this way were both very powerful, very unusual, and very, very strange, slightly otherworldly.
¿Qué pasa, capitán?
Rebeca, ¿por qué no hay nada oculto que no haya de ser manifestado?
It is, to my mind, an incredible music soundtrack.
¿Qué está pasando ahí abajo?